The Kiwisquashcast is an in-season pod and vodcast for New Zealand squash fans. Each episode gives an update on the squash scene from a Kiwi perspective. We cover local and international pro squash and provide updates on domestic events. In each episode, we feature interviews with persons of interest and tips for your squash game. Message if you have content that demands to be on the show. Subscribe to our social media accounts for updates. The PSA Summer Series kicked off the pro season for New Zealand 2021. In the end, COVID intervened, but we managed to squeeze out 5 events. Starting with the Rochelle Hobbs Henderson Open, the national champ Evan Williams got the win after a decent day.
Williams third day. He's happy with that. And winning in.
For the men, 3 satellites followed, with Temuera Chilishi claiming his 3rd and 4th PSA satellite titles. Finally, the Bemba Warrior fronted with some game and took the last 2 events, including his first Challenger Tour title. The points summary for top 8 is generally to form and number of events, but a few points of interest. Only 2 of the top 8 played all events, and one of those, Mason Smales, comes in 7th thanks to being more professional in 2021. Shirt looks pretty good. Yeah, good on you, mate. Yeah, extra brownie points for that. I'll send a picture through to Jason.
And I just saw Van der Sar buying a pie. I said, mate, you can't eat pies, son. Hey, don't eat too many pies.
Well, he must be burning the calories. He did that charity run for his wife, didn't he? Or his wife. God, that was a Freudian slip for his partner.
Mate, Chris is running, and I respectfully gave him crap. Is not the greatest sight, mate.
I can imagine. And what have you been up to, mate? I guess you're grinding away, working hard.
We're flat out with mate. My little grooming business. I've got 3 guys flat out doing that, and mate, life's good. I'm actually enjoying being. It's really look, mate, taking sort of like less of an interest in the game at this stage. It's quite nice being, mate. It's quite liberating being outside it for a while, you know.
Yeah, but you can do stuff you want to do rather than feeling pressured to do things to pay the bills.
And having said that, John, it's like we'll talk about this as we go forward. Anyway, you rock into it, mate.
Yeah, okay. Look, I did want to chat to you for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, we had a great trip with you guys last year when we went down for the Palmy Satellite, and the week before we dropped in at Wanganui, or Whanganui, you can correct me if you like, and really enjoyed the club down there. I think that it's a great club. It's a great setup. Nice bar area, courts have been renovated, and just thought what a great facility. And then obviously we had a great time down there because, you know, the guys made a couple of dollars doing lessons and just had a lot of fun. Yeah, and so I guess we were pretty excited that, you know, to see another great club in the regions and one where there was a little bit of spunk to it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was great timing, really. I suppose it wasn't planned, but it just happened to happen that way. And it's really interesting. We've spoken about this before, John, but I've also learnt this with sort of my coaching blueprint over the years back in New Zealand, where it's different than offshore. But, you know, the provinces are generally really supportive. Like when I coached a lot at Owakuni and RodNui, mate, you get absolutely booked out. You've obviously got to deliver a good product, but it's the same with having you guys there. And I mean, you can vouch for this. I'm pretty parochial with my home little club, but you know, locals are pretty excited to see you guys. Yeah, and look, they still talk about you, mate. They follow obviously with Tim and Louis and Joel. They follow them with real interest, mate. I talk to the guys, mate, and they really do follow the guys intently. You know.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, We had a great time down there. I'm not going to rant too much about that. Just waiting for you to invite us back, big boy.
Welcome anytime. Just give me the nod.
Yeah. Now, so just to kick this off, I did do my little cheat sheet there, and I said we'd start off on your background. So you've been involved in squash a long time. You've played a lot of other sports too, which we probably won't go into too much, and you're a fan of a lot of other sports, but you played junior squash to a pretty high level.
I first started when I was 12, John, accidentally. My dad was president of a rugby club. Look, cut a long story short, I hit on a court that had two courts called Tech Old Boys in Wanganui at the time, with a tennis ball and a tennis racket. And I went to the North Island Juniors a week later, played the under-13s, never hit a squash ball until my first round, and I could only hit a backhand, and I ended up winning the under-13s by just running around and hitting a backhand. And I rang my mum up. I still remember to this day and go, "Oh, hi, Mum." She's go, "Oh, how'd you go?" They have no idea about squash. I hit it. Look, mate, I had 3 games of squash that weekend with whatever dot it was, and I sort of won, and, just said, "Oh, I won." And sort of like, "Oh, cool." And then they said, "Oh, that's great." And then come and pick me up. So that's how I started my squash. My first tournament was the North Island under-13s, yeah.
Yeah, that's unreal, isn't it? And then after that, obviously, you got into it and got to a pretty good level as a junior and played for New Zealand. Your Worlds, was it in Australia?
In Brisbane, so it was a bit of an eye-opener. A Wanganui boy, where I'm based now, left it for 20-odd years. Went to Brisbane, mate, with a guy from Otaki, a guy from Waipakarau, and obviously Glenn Wilson at the time, Hut, who I lived with for a few years during the junior years. And we went over and went, saw the sun and saw the beach, and the results off the court were far better than them on. But that's another story.
Yeah, great experience though. And you had a few good guys at that event, didn't you, in terms of later on top PSA players?
Juncture won it, and Rod Isles comes second. So there's a myriad of, that period of squash, John, the 80s was pretty good, right? It was so Juncture won it, and Rod Isles was sort of runner up, and I've still kept in touch with sort of Rod Isles to this day. So as with any sport, mate, you kick off and you meet some really good friends for life.
And you've coached around the world, but more recently, and I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on this. You were in Australia at Carrara, and can you just sort of give us a little bit of background as to why you made the shift over there, and what the experience was like?
First thing was my wife let me go, so that was the first thing. As you know, mate, I've got a young family. And kids are doing stuff, and it's they're growing up and all that stuff. So I went across for 9 months by myself, come home and back occasionally. Now, answer your question, it was just an opportunity for me. I've always been interested in being involved in sort of high performance sport. Now, Australia at the time, we all know as well as each other, it has its challenges like many countries do. And I just really enjoyed, national sporting organisation. You're never going to win. You've got different relationships with different stakeholders, states and all that. Not good, not bad, but always a challenge. I just saw the opportunity as being really exciting. And during my tenure, mate, there was, Stuart Boswell come on board. Jeannie Tuncalf got involved. Lockie Johnson was the high performance manager. And they were doing some really good stuff. But Australia obviously has its challenges like New Zealand do, mate. But look, to this day, I still keep in touch with those guys and follow the kids like Nick Calvert and Tom Calvert and those kids. And I see Alex Hayden just recently won a first PSA. So I still follow them with interest because, I sort of dipped the toes there for a year and a bit.
What's the story with Carrara there? Because, and I think this is probably a learning for New Zealand as well, is, the idea of building a high performance centre, taking those new courts from the Com Games, setting up in what appears to be an ideal location, but not really getting traction. The players really, not many of the players are there, and you've got a really, really good coach who's hardly working with anyone. And their winning edge criteria are kind of unusual in that there's really no senior pros that make the criteria, other than Nick probably. And so they're then left with only 1 or 2 juniors that meet the criteria because they've won junior titles, which is quite a different thing.
It's really interesting. Look, again, I've never really expressed my thoughts on my time in Australia and what I think about the system. But Carrara, for me, I was mainly doing the operational side, and I was involved a bit with the World Juniors until that was cancelled. To answer your question again too, yeah, Nick and Tom have got winning edge. I see they've got redone scholarships again for Nick and Tom. Look, they work well, they work hard. Boz, I've really got massive respect for Stuart Boswell. Jeff Hunt, obviously sort of commended him to go into that position. After he's up in Qatar, Jeff got him into Qatar. And I watched Boz. Mate, I've watched a lot of people over the years, and you sort of look at it sort of objectively and non-objectively, and you sort of compare things. And look, I'm not just saying this to say this. I just thought, I think Stuart's an exceptional coach. He really is. I think he's going to do great things. You're correct, John. There was Greg Chan at the time, Alex. There's a few of the kids come down from Brisbane and train occasionally, but they're affiliated to like Stafford and also Daisy Hill with Brad Hindle's program.
Yeah.
Tom and Nick Daly and sort of Greg, and that did a lot of one-on-ones, and I don't want to talk out of context too either, because I just observed, but a lot of one-on-ones, mate. A lot of, Boz spending time with them, occasionally doing track sessions, and they sort of did group hitting in the afternoon, and a few of the other guys locally joined them to sort of give them hits. But yeah, interesting program. It was really tough for Carrara too, John, in the high performance space, because to justify to the stakeholders and the board and other states and other players as good, if not better, than the kids coming through the program, that Carrara was an asset, whereas Squash Aussie, I think the biggest challenge was, mate, and my thinking on this is that Carrara, it was really tough to go into centre management when it probably wasn't their core business, John, that, they weren't very good at it. Again, respectfully, but they really dipped their toes. I know Davey White's a good bugger too, Davey, and his wife are running around with his parents supporting him. Waka Ellis is at Labrador, and there's obviously Palm Beach just up the road. So it sort of challenged. It was tough getting Carrara funded and possibly running in the red quite deeply, and justifying being a centre and playing pennant and that, and having club members, taking it away from people that vested their own money into it. So it's always going to be a challenge for the squash community in that respect.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess it's very easy from this side of the ditch to sort of challenge the thought process that went into it. But we've certainly seen similar things here with, my experience with Excel or even Unitech. Unitech obviously struggles a little, and you've got that mixed model, which may or may not work. Yeah, it's interesting. No, I was interested in your comments there. What do you think they're going to do? Because I feel that they need more athletes training there more often to get the most out of the coach, because they still spend a lot of money on that program.
Yeah, look, yes, I agree. They do. And it's sort of like, some days, mate, when I was there again, and whoever watches this, the guys over there, I'll just say this openly. It's like, mate, you got sometimes 1, 2, 3 kids hitting, right, in an HP program. So again, I'm not saying that's wrong or right. It's sort of like you got a 6-court venue that's in a shire or a council building. You got 2 kids hitting, right? So with a national coach occasionally, and I can't speak as of today, even though I speak to the guys reasonably regularly. But I see recently they've got down to, I see the guys are in South Aussie the other week. Jenny and Lockie and Boz are in South Aussie doing a HP sort of training thing there. So I think they're trying to connect more with the states, but up into this sort of day, John, they've really had quite a good relationship with ACT. Yeah. And I see they've just been to South Australia where James Rogers is. So yeah, I suppose that's, but I agree, mate. Carrara's been, it's the $1 million question, and a lot of stakeholders do believe it should be simply used for really international tournaments and major tournaments, and maybe leave the centres to do the day-to-day operational stuff with pennants and like ladies' nights and all that stuff. And maybe Carrara's used as a specialised centre, but you've got to have the players, John. So it's still a question they're asking themselves, mate, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And as I say, I think good learnings for New Zealand potentially, because there's always discussion about having high performance here and doing different things. And I think it's a good lesson that just having a facility is not a guarantee for success. And they've got a lot of things right there. As I say, good facility, good coach, huge gym across the road. Lots of resources on paper, lots of support services, a qualified and well-liked manager of the program, and yet no one's there.
It's interesting, John. I think the challenge is now too, where you think about, I'm watching the latest PSAs over there, and it's like everything's, well, I've seen Victoria have had a few lately.
Yeah.
But I see Queensland's, it's gone back to sort of the 80s model where Queensland had basically 100 centres and one on every corner, where all the PSAs are being played in Queensland. And of late, speaking to a few parents there of late back in Australia, it's like, AJC, can you call it the AJC if only Aussie kids are playing, right? Because our kids won't go there for obvious reasons now of all those sort of challenges. But so there's a whole lot of questions. There's more questions than answers, John. And I must commend them for giving PSAs a crack, but it seems to be, and we'll talk about this a bit later, I see Tamika's come back on the scene, Tamika Saxby-Hunt.
Yeah.
I see Christina's played the last couple of weekends, Christina Nunn. And so there's a few people possibly appearing because of Com Games, if that goes ahead in 500 days. So it's interesting. It looks like they're doing reasonably well. And I think they've got a few good players. Maybe they've got more depth than us now, made it at the higher level. That's arguable. But I think they're hanging in there.
Well, look, I would say definitely on the women's side, they have more depth because they've got, 4 or 5 ladies in the top 100 or thereabouts, which we don't have that many. But that's correct. I think on the men's side, they're quite a bit weaker. I see Rex has rejoined the tour, which is humour. So he's and Jack Hudson, who has had a couple of good results. And he's won a few events, and I'm not sure that he's necessarily playing at a great level, but he's turning up and he's getting results, which is good on him.
Yeah, it's nice kid, a lovely kid, Jack too. But I see he's making an effort to get to Queensland and to Victoria lately. So he's obviously chasing a few, right, for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's a smart thing to do. You've got to get out there. You can't just sit at home on your couch and wait for stuff to come to you. So I think that's good on him. I agree with you. They've had a decent run of satellites. I guess what I'm a little surprised with is they haven't boosted those to 3s and 5s to the same extent that New Zealand's been doing with this PSA offer. So I'm not sure whether that's a club thing or a national body or a state thing, but they haven't really taken full advantage of that as I see it.
What used to happen, John, again, not long ago, was Jordan Till, obviously the events manager for squash. They would go through their budget and obviously liaise with the CE, who's not there now, and sort of put a plan in place here. But I have no idea how they're going about it at this stage. But it seems very Queensland heavy at the moment. And obviously Victoria have got a few on the massive. Look, I remember talking to Paul Price when he was national coach there, John, and Paul Price would say he saw us guys in New Zealand more than he saw the coaches in Aussie, right? Because like he said, we're very fortunate in New Zealand that I can come and see you today, mate, and you can come and see me. And he said, look, it's a massive challenge geographically in Aussie to get together and do things. You'll notice in Aussie, mate, when they have a PSA in Queensland, they'll generally have a conference. They'll generally have a coaching conference. They'll have, they'll have a development camp, and they do it all over like 5 days because they just can't sort of do. We're very lucky we can put things together in different states or regions quickly and make it happen.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And just finally, obviously, a lot of centres have closed in Australia. Well, what do you see happening in squash over there? Is it just going to be a bit bumpy for the next few years?
I'll put COVID aside. I'll sort of go outside that at this stage. Look, John, the challenge again over there is like you'll understand this. We've talked about this in depth too. You've got commercial properties and really good real estate. So John and Rod own a centre in, let's say, Daisy Hill, good old Brad Hindle's area, let's say. And somebody comes up to us and offers us 1.2 and we go, happy days, good luck, high five, let's get out of here. And it gets knocked over and gets built into sort of, return on investment blue chip property. So, most of the court owners are either leasing or they own the buildings, which are in really good real estate places. Look, John, I think now, look in Queensland, mate, back in the day, their heyday, 120, 130 centres. There's probably 8 to 9 functioning now, and I think Daisy Hill with Brad's probably one of the most proactive, and I speak to Brad quite a bit, and said he still thinks there's a long way to go with his centre. But look, you know what it takes, John. You've got to be motivated, you've got to drive it. It's thankless. You've got to be there at midnight, you've got to be vacuuming, so it takes a certain people to do it. But it's going to be a tough one, mate. And look, a year ago, if you asked me, I was actually going to say I don't think the sport will survive, but I can't really say now. It's very expensive to have empty buildings, right? And you got to pay the bills.
Fair enough. And so, as we headed into COVID, you made a decision to come back to New Zealand, and you're still in touch with people here, and obviously you were watching things and from not too far away, keeping in touch with family and coming back. But did it give you a different perspective coming back to New Zealand squash after having spent a year working in the nitty-gritty of Oz squash?
Yeah, look, I still want to be heavily involved in squash. Right now, I'm really happy where life's at. I'm doing some other stuff. Look, I've got all this experience to do some stuff, and obviously I'm still doing a bit to keep my hand in. But, yeah, it's... New Zealand, I can't speak for the NSO here, mate, the national body. I've had a good relationship with Shelley. Obviously, as you know, my oldest daughter's involved in some sort of programming there along with other sports. And so I'm more involved now, John, with supporting her and my wife are, and her in the sort of system as say. So my main experience now is in the junior system, right? And going to tourneys with her at this stage.
Sure. And before we dive into that, though, we obviously have a lot more PSA activity with what we call emerging pros here. I would say more so than 4 or 5 years ago. Do you have a sort of view on that, or any impression of how that's going?
Look, mate, and when you guys came here, I was excited to get you guys here, and I like the guys. They're good kids, Tim, Louie, and Joel. You're doing great things with them. Great feedback on it. Look, it's really important. Look, for me, if I put myself back in those shoes when I was in Germany in the 90s, it's just critically important for us to support these kids, right? We're a minor sport. These kids are putting it out there. You're supporting your group, your 3 lads at this stage, and others, obviously. But, mate, it's critical we support them. Look, I've spoken to a few other people that, that come up to me when I was away about a month ago going, you got the guys here. We can't do that at our club. And I'm like, mate, well, you can do it if you want to do it, right? It's like, so what we did in Wanganui, John, I really honestly think that other clubs should bar up and support these kids as much as they can. Look, I think also for ex-squashies like me that played a bit, and that it's really important for us to acknowledge that space. And there's plenty of us out there now. I think of guys in Wellington I speak to, Gizzy and that, and all over the place. It's really important we try and assist these kids, ladies, men to put these events on. It's critical for these kids to be playing out. That's our big point of difference at the moment too. I speak to Alan Thatcher, as you know, from Squash Mad and
Yep.
And World Squash. I spoke to Alan today actually, and look, he just thinks we're in such a unique position in New Zealand. He said it's literally tipping over by the day in the UK, as well as I do. And he's like, they haven't got an answer yet, and they're trying to look at new models for squash and pickleball. But look, they're flabbergasted with us still playing. They just think we're so bloody fortunate.
Yeah, that's true. I think I've said before, we don't often have a lot of advantage from being so remote. Normally it's a huge disadvantage, but it's nice to get a bit of payback on that for once in our lives, really, I guess. Yeah. And you're right, we have to take advantage of this opportunity while we can. I think a lot of people forget it's not going to be around forever, hopefully. So just jumping back then into junior squash, your daughter's at a good level, competing at a very, very good level. And that's got its challenges, I guess. The competition system, coaching, camps, all that kind of stuff. How are you finding that so far?
Yeah, I'll go to the competition system. I speak with my wife regularly about this too. It's, look, mate, again, it's very challenging for provincial parents, coaches with players, to get exposure to sort of regular competition like it is in Auckland, mate. And it's and look, this is not unique, right? We're very fortunate as a family that we can get our daughters to competition, and we can sort of afford to do that on a second mortgage, literally. But
Yeah.
but mate, it's we sort of support her in that. And as you now know, John, sort of the challenges we've got. I speak from my experience. voicing other parents as well. The challenge we got with our daughter is that, my daughter's excited when she's doing one sport, she's excited when they're doing the next. And nowadays, if a kid can catch a ball, they play for Queensland. That was always my standing joke in Queensland, right? If you can hit a ball up in your racket twice, you can get selected for Queensland. It's so that they get pulled left, right, and centre. But what I need to learn, mate, and we're going on to the subject, and I as a parent, I need to my wife just said, you just got to let it be. So, the junior system, I'm more focused on the parental side, John. So look, if she wants to play a tournament, we will. We've got, I'm more interested.
Well, I mean, I'll help you out here, and I'll agree with you. I think the system we've got in terms of competitions is really good here. There's lots of tournaments, and obviously women and girls have to get the benefit of being able to play against boys and men, which is helpful at all levels and provincially as well. There is lots of competition, North Island's, various district junior opens, and there's quite a good system, and then ultimately it leads through to selection for things like secondary schools and competitions with Australia and then World Juniors and senior teams. So there's quite a lot there if someone wants to get involved in it. But I'll set you up by saying that it is a bit of a, it's a high pressure environment. It can be because there's a lot of intense sort of activity at some of these junior events.
Yeah, look, look, John, this is really close to my heart. This, and I put a bit of stuff up about this on platforms, and it's I've had to learn from being that. Really, I want to beat everyone up, and my daughter has to win everything. Like 18 months ago, and getting really involved emotionally. I've just really got to. So, if I let things unfold, for me, my daughter's 13, mate, I want her to still be a kid. Finding balance is tough because she's involved in so many things. But from a parental point of view, John, what I can say to parents or any parents that hear this, it's like, it's going to be what it's going to be. Yes, we need to be competitive. Yes, it's really great that our kids win, lose, or win. But for me, look, I'm the last person to say this, John. Everything's not about winning when you're 12, 13, 14. I'm really interested in the development of the kid off the court, on the court. I'm also interested in them. I'm really interested in my daughter. We're already thinking about this now, mate. Being really competitive at 19, 20, 21, 22. So no matter what path they choose to do, John, and that's probably going to be their path anyway. What I find now at junior tournaments, and I'll say this hand on heart, I don't really enjoy junior tournaments. I don't enjoy some of the adults and their behaviours there, and I've really learnt to, and I'm the worst filthy competitor in the world when I play, John, but I've really learned to sort of pull my head in and act and behave the same if my daughter wins, loses or draws. For me, it's about being respectable, having good values, working hard, having a good attitude, and all those things. And winning and losing is going to work itself out anyway, John. And I'm going to go to you guys here, and I look at the likes of Joel, and I remember when my daughter Aria was here in the Wanganui, and the kids, your boys, talked to the kids, and it was really interesting because Aria's going about nationals this and nationals that, and I think Louis goes, oh crikey, I never won a junior national tournament, and Paul Cole's a great blueprint for me. It's look, mate, I love this one, and this is me, I'll stick by this. Nobody remembers an outstanding junior that won every tournament. And I think a lot of the parents, John, I'm going to say this, a lot of the parents are far too focused on winning, far too focused on kids getting to be one at 3 years old and going to a junior tournament and being seeded higher than Bob, Jim or Jenny. So look, our philosophy we take on, John, now is, you sort of gave us this pitch. If we enter, we front up. Whether my daughter's number 38 seed, number 2 seed, number 3 seed, number 40 seed, we play the number 1 seed in the first round, second round, and we carry on. Look, I've learned to sort of look at it that way, as opposed to pulling my kid out if she's playing against a better player or not fronting up. Aria knows now, and we always ask her if she wants to play. And she enters, she plays, we never pull out. If she doesn't want to play, for good enough reasons. Sometimes they need a push. Then she's probably doing another sport that weekend anyway, John. But I emphasise again, the parents put far too much emphasis on winning and controlling what their kids are doing. And parents can listen to this, and you know who you are. And I'm going to put my hand on heart with this. We need to stop pushing our kids into a corner and trying to be the best player at 13, 14, 15, 16. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with that. I think when I first sort of, as an ex-squash parent, when I first got involved in the system, I thought a lot of the things were quite good. And every year there was I call it a soap opera of who was going to make the team for the World Juniors. And it was always very, very interesting to sort of watch that unfold and see how certain people that were favourites would drop out and others would come through. And, it was fun to watch. And I think that was a great thing at the time for me coming into the sport at that level. But I now look on it and I think that the obsession with making teams is actually killing the quality of play and the ongoing development of juniors. So you've got kids at very young ages getting burnt out because of pressure, all to make a team, and then they just don't make it. They might make the team.
You couldn't have set that up better, actually. I was thinking about this morning, John, before we chatted too. I don't know many people, I speak for myself in my own experience, that's played juniors, went through seniors, still played and carried on playing to masters until my whole body broke down. But, John, and I for example, I played the game. I never played the game because I didn't love it. And I think Evan mentioned this the other day when I chatted to him about some other stuff, actually. Evan said, he's never played it because he's always loved it. It's like I always thought. I remember playing Masters, and I played in Tauranga a couple of years ago, and it's like, it took me to 50 to realise, man, I love this sport. I just love it. And it wasn't because if I bet Danny or Danny McQueen bet me or Mike, whoever it was like, I'm just going to play because I love it. And I sort of found my love for it again. I went through about 15 or 20 years with sleepless nights thinking, oh my goodness, I hope I can beat Jim or Bob or, all the putting pressure and stress on myself intrinsically about who I was going to play the next week. Even when these high performance guys will get this, they play on a Sunday, and the first thing you think about, who have I got next round? You never celebrate your performance, or you never really think, why am I playing the sport? I really admire the people that carry on, and there's not many, John, that go juniors. Kids, what they do nowadays, they get a job and they say, I'm busy. I'm like, well, you never really like the sport anyway, champ. Just play. Just play and enjoy it. And as you know, John, people it's out of my control as a parent anyway, what my kids are going to do, and I never, ever really sort of sit down with my wife and go, oh, blah, blah about other, because when you have kids, right, it's like anything can happen. So I just think you just got to really enjoy what's in front of you and just tuck into it, compete hard, mate, have a good attitude and bloody enjoy it.
I agree with that, and that's exactly how we like to think we do things with our young pros. There's a lot of doubt, I think, in New Zealand about the reasons for burnout of a lot of athletes, and I certainly have strong views about what I think they are, and it's definitely not overtraining as I see it. But I think we've got a lot of kids that reach a point where the expectations on them, or whether that's external or internal, exceed sort of their belief in their ability to achieve those goals. And that sort of leads to that burnout that we're seeing quite a lot in New Zealand squash.
I'm again, to add to what you were saying, we've been very clear with our daughter, our oldest daughter, for example. Honey, if you don't want to play, if you don't want to train, if you don't want to do this, then don't do it. And because a couple of years ago, she was always like, "Oh, Dad, I'm playing because you done this and that." But we had to sort of pull that pressure away from them, and say intently, John, and sincerely, like, look, dear, you play it if you want to play it. And I'll be the parent, and all that stuff, mate. I think we've got to get back to seeing kids playing for the right reason. Parents, would never admit that they're doing it for whatever reason, but I believe most parents at national tournaments, we all think our daughters and sons are going to be world champions when they're not. It's a fact,
In terms of being a squash parent, you've talked quite a bit about it, but just to sort of cover a couple of other things. So in your case, the whole balance is better thing is quite trendy right now, so much so that like a lot of issues and political issues, it's impossible to speak against it. But certainly at the age that your eldest is at, playing multiple sports is absolutely the right thing for her to be doing and just having fun. But I think the thing that you're doing well is that when she does play squash, she's getting quality training.
Look, this has taken me a couple of years to learn too, John, even though I've been in the game for 40 years and coached a lot. So being a parent's different, all right? You know that. It's different being a parent and working with a child. But me and Martin have got to manage an example, just my kid. I'm not saying my kid's great, but our management around Aria is she does 15 hours of swim coaching, swim training a week, massive load. Her choice. She's getting into athletics a bit now. She plays rep netball. And again, I just bang my head every time this happens, but she wants to do it. And then so what I do with Aria, I've got to fit in 4 or 5 sessions a week of how do I manage her energy and what do I need to work on court. Mate, we're on and off court in 40, 45 minutes, basically just to a plan. And again, look, with what I do with her, she loves music. So we take the boom box down. She puts the music on, she does it. What do they do? What's that thing? TikTok. She does a bit of damn TikTok while she's on court and she smiles. So I've learnt to be less stressful on her and I find, mate, we'll work on some specific stuff and we'll get off the court and I'll get her home and she'll recover or whatever. But, girls are different too, mate. We've talked about this before and you've said about boys too. Look, I find if young ladies are in a good space, they generally have a reasonably good performance. That doesn't mean they win, but they generally. So I manage her load around whatever else she's doing. I don't thrash her. I do nothing at all physical with on court, mate, but she does 8 and 1500s at school. So on a Wednesday now, I've swapped out a squash training, for example. She does plyometrics with her athletics coach, and she does, like footwork. So hello, that's great.
Yeah.
Happy days. So that's become a session. She also works with a lady here who's really magnificent with kids with autism, but works with Aria around dial and energy and not going above level 10 and dialing down when on court. So we do a lot of work around breath and that sort of stuff, which not only is good for her sport, but is great for her schoolwork and all that stuff. So we're trying to balance out, mate, without being too structured, but the busy kid we count a session as watching a video or analysis, or which you're very good at, John, or reading some script or having a massage. That's also a session. So she doesn't have to be on court all the time hitting balls for 300 hours a week because other things are complementary to what she's doing. So it all intermingles for me, mate.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the stuff you talked about is great training. They used to call it cross training back in the day. It used to be very trendy, not so much anymore, but certainly a lot of that other stuff she's doing is, she's got that aerobic base, doesn't need to do courties, doing a bit of plyo is great. It's definitely ticking a lot of boxes. You've touched on it quite a bit already, but one thing that you're increasingly interested in is the mental side of the game. And what are your goals there? Where are you taking that? What are you going to do with that?
Look, John, again, I'm sort of, as I said right at the start, I'm sort of sitting on a few things and seeing what, for me, it's like a business, right? Seeing what a niche is, seeing what the opportunity is. But going forward, I think what I'll do, I'll formalise some qualifications around that. I wrote a book about, 12 years ago called Fitness from the Inside and Out, 40 years of learning from lessons of life or whatever. I wrote that and I wrote that after I watched Nick Willis actually come third at the Olympics. I just woke up one night, watched that, and sort of 6 months later, I wrote a book. Didn't even know I could write, but I've always had an interest in it. I've always got an interest in everything we think comes, we develop things physically from. So I don't think we understand. It's a real grey area. I spoke to Lockie Johnson about this a lot in Aussie about psychologists can get a little bit tricky and sort of have really fancy words, and they sort of like to keep stuff secret, and they're quite tough to sort of get into programs. But I'd like to think that I could sort of break a few things down and work on some stuff with athletes, businesses as such. I see Paul Price is doing it in Aussie now, and just work off with some athletes about sort of thoughts become things. So I remember I saw this the other day actually for the first time, and I've got a bit slack on this. Ari usually warms up with some mental stuff and she dials into whatever she needs to do, and she's got a little system. But she went and played and had a bit of a mud game, as you do. Anyone can do that. And we had a chat on the way home, and it all come from here. It's you don't stop being a reasonably good player at something overnight, but didn't get the mind tuned in, so everything else followed. But where am I going with that, John? I'll probably start doing a bit more formal work on it in the next 6 months or so. But I just believe everything starts with the mental side, and it's a very, very grey area. Speaking to Glenn about this a year or so ago too, it's a really grey area, particularly in our code. We do a hell of a lot of physical training. We don't really look after the old top two that much.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a huge area. People would say to me back in the day, what percent of the game is mental, and expecting me to come back and say 20%, 30% or whatever. And I'd always say to them 100% or 110%, because, occasionally I like to exaggerate. And they'd always say, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, look, when you get on court, you can't get any fitter. You can't develop your shots. You've got what you've got. And so it entirely comes down to your ability to put on the court what you've trained for. Certainly in terms of competition, I believe the mental side is everything. And I think it is very much an underexplored area in New Zealand squash.
On that point too, John, it's also, you come to a point and squashies will get this, higher graded squashies will get this. It's also understanding body language of other players, tactics after a long rally, throwing a ball up in the air, just keeping an eye on your opponent too, not for what shots they're playing, but also, having an awareness around where your opponent is mentally. So that goes beyond your own thinking and all that stuff. Mate, we've seen it in PSAs, right? Why do the guys wipe their hand on the glass at the back before all this sort of world stuff started? They're just resetting and doing. I mean, you guys use that word, right? I heard the boys the other day say reset. I think Joel was playing actually Evan the final the other week, and I think Louis or Tim yelled out reset. So all that sort of stuff, and we've all got our ways to go about it. But I'm no different with my 13-year-old mate. We sort of started with her when she was 11, and mate, she might retain 2%, but then it becomes 5%. Then it becomes. But it's got to be continuous practice. It's no different than the other stuff we do. It's got to be practiced.
I hear what you're saying. We're watching the netball Constellation Cup. New Zealand won it for one of the few occasions. And my wife is saying to me, she was listening to the coach, Nolene, and saying, oh, she sounds like you, using the same words, which is kind of funny, really. So I hear what you're saying. Yeah, look, I recollect being involved in a camp many, many moons ago. And a psychologist came in from High Performance Sport to give a chat with the athletes, and it was just before they were about to go away to Kuala Lumpur, I think. And the coaches stepped out, and it was just the athletes and the psychologist. And I thought afterwards a couple of things. The first thing was this: if what this guy was saying was valuable, and I think it was, it should have been at the first camp, when they were 12, not the last camp before they go to their World Juniors. And I guess the second thing I thought was, again, how can they practice this stuff if the coaches aren't there engaging in the session? Because there's very little value in having these sessions if you don't then immediately go out and practice and put it into how you prepare and play.
Yeah, really good point. Actually, you've just brought me back to when the likes of Wayne Goldsmith, who's a bit of a legendary guy in the HP area, he does his own consulting now in Aussie. He come and delivered something for us, our performance sort of level 3 WSF sort of coaching on the Gold Coast a year or so ago. And it's really interesting you said that. Actually, then a mental coach come in as well, but the coaches weren't in the room. It was really quite, having said that, but the kids were there. Some of the parents were there, but there was no connection. But it's sort of like different parts of a business too, like, they work independently when they should work together. So, the coaches should be there, the mental people should be there. So it was really fractionalized. So that's a really interesting point. You've just alluded to me, actually, that I'd probably like to be, I think the niche in New Zealand at the moment, I mean, everyone's a coach now, right? Again, I don't say that out of context. Everyone's got a coach. You go to every tournament, everyone's got a coach, right? Whatever that means. And everyone's an expert. But I do believe, for me, I think the smart area for me to be involved in now, with my other experience of playing and whatever the heck else I've done, mate, and coaching, is that I really think there's a desperate need for some mental stuff to be done. I think that's where I'll slot in going forward in the game here.
Right. And you're still doing a bit of other coaching, but you see that as an area you'd like to focus on more.
Yeah, look, I do. I still love. Look, I do love working with kids, mate. I really do. The youthful sort of exuberance until they get to a certain age. That's a whole different discussion. But for me, mate, my real interest is now I'm pulled towards more literature, and I follow a guy called Brian Kane online, and he's an interesting American guy that does the mental side and some certification. But I'm more intrigued in sort of reading literature on that now, as opposed to more the coaching side. So I just think there's a massive opportunity in it, and it's an area somebody's got to do, or someone's got to delve into. There's a myriad of coaches you can go to. There's not many people you can turn to and have a chat to about the mental side. I just think we're sort of getting pretty full, mate, on the technical, whatever that means, and on-court coaching side. It's desperately need the mental side.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with you there. It's going to be difficult to build a business like that, not because there's not a gap, but just simply that it's pulling the market, getting the market to realize the value of it. So I wish you luck, but I know you'll go well, because you're a persistent bugger.
Yeah, look, again, mate, it might be just diving into a few camps and saying, give us a crack and give me an hour, and sit in if you want. Look, I'm happy to do that. So, or I sound like I'm doing mate, what am I doing? I'm doing a bit of a spin for myself, mate. But
no, I mean, so you should. I think my experience of the mental side is that we can go into a lot of very, very complicated and very deeply researched principles and concepts. My feeling is that there's actually very little of it being done right now. So the vast majority of coaching will be technically based in terms of producing a shot or a game plan or a pattern. And there'll be very little discussion around mental preparation or managing that side of it between games, before and after matches. So I think there's a very, very big gap there. And I guess my own experience is that it can be very, very successful at a very low level in terms of complication. So if you do something, very simply, but do it consistently, you can get great results. It doesn't need to be,
things like, let's say, for example, I'll just use a name. Let's say Joel playing Evan. What were you thinking then? Why were you thinking that? What's going on, mate? You're just asking questions. And I remember doing life coaching certification about a decade ago. It's simply like, how you doing today, mate? That can open up an hour discussion from somebody, and you just sit back. So just getting people to actually think.
Yeah, I agree.
And people come back with like, I don't know, and you just sort of throw back at them, well, pretend you do know. So it's just, mate, it's just, that, John, it's like coaching technically. It's just asking questions and the person bringing themselves to a conclusion and a realization. Now that mightn't happen immediately, but it's having them to have responsibility and some autonomy around also being able to self-manage in the moment, right? Yeah.
Now, I'm going to chuck a curveball at you because it's not on the cheat sheet, but what's your view on the talent we're producing in New Zealand and why we're maybe not getting the numbers through to the top that we otherwise should be getting?
Yeah, John, I'm going to also sort of go into a bit of a backstop here and say it's not unique to our sport. Because I'm across a few sports now at a reasonable level. It's not unique to our sport, mate. Kids, I don't have the answer. I'd love a massive discussion around it. But I'll allude to what you said. People think it's burnout, but it's actually not. I agree with you. Absolute rubbish. People overtrain. Mate, I'm still involved in the game. I was to 50 at a reasonably high level for 38 years training. So it's not burnout. It's not burnout. That's for me. But yeah, what are we producing? The NSO, I can't speak for them. Look, I don't know, mate. It worries me when I think about it. Who's after Joey? I see Amanda came back. Was Amanda playing the other day? She played.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Amanda came back the other day. Yeah, so I don't think we're producing anything special. Again, people, that's not about who's playing. I think we've got some really good players. We've got some solid A graders, but we've always had that. And who's under Joey? I don't know, and also of late, some players have sort of been right up at the top and gone missing for a year or two and then said, oh, I'll come back now. But what's their reason for coming back? Is it simply because of Com Games or I don't know, because they want to play? I don't think we're doing anything special, mate. Again, that's not pointing the finger at anyone. And I don't know the answer to that. A whole lot of things, John? You've got to earn an income. You've got to pay your rent. Some people have phases of life and I know Amanda had to work a job after a while, Danny used to, a whole lot of reasons, mate. Look, mate, and you're unique. You're putting some really, really awesome energy into the boys and they're committed to that cause. So Evan said that at Nationals, right? I mean, Evan said that himself. He said, you guys are doing some great work and maybe you're doing the work that maybe our national body could be doing, not only here, but in other countries. So I haven't really got an answer for that. I don't think we're producing anything special, mate, to answer your question.
I'm going to agree with you that at that particular point, there's not a lot of talent at a level to crow about. I guess my feeling is I seem to feel that we, and based on my experience of athletes developing, there's quite a few at a junior level that are potential, and very, very few of those actually make the transition. And I think actually it's true in squash around the world. There's not too many places where there's a system that helps with that transition. I think generally athletes are left to their own devices, and it's a bit of a dog eat dog until someone makes it, which works well in places like Egypt when you've got so many kids that you can just throw them against each other and the biggest dog will come out the top, and that's fine. When you've only got 2 or 3 kids, it doesn't work.
Go back to the 80s and 90s, John, and again, during our junior years, there was always one player that most of the resources went into, right? But there's still about 20-odd, in those days, a different A grade, 20-odd players A grade that loved the game and played in different places. And we were very lucky in those days, John. We had the under-23s, so we had the under-23s. We played, England come across once. I think we played the Aussies. We had an under-23 tour. So, but that didn't mean, see, again, John, my parents had no idea about professional sport, and we had to go. I went to Germany for a start simply because a mate rang up and said, "Do you want to play in Germany?" There was no, and our club didn't produce good players because of we just happened to be. My parents took me to tournaments, right? So there wasn't a system to produce things. It was so because your parents, like in ballet or whatever, they just took you to stuff, and you were very lucky to compete, but. I don't think we've got. It's interesting, isn't it? From that age to 17 to 23. And again, I don't think it's a responsibility of any one party, particularly the NSO, but maybe there needs to be some more discussion around how can we actually, how can we commercially get these guys on board? For example, when you guys come to Wanganui, why can't we produce more of that stuff to support players to get things done? Those boys that week, we got you some accommodation. If we can do it in Wanganui, we can do it anywhere. And we gratefully did it for you guys. You guys were. We got you accommodation. I sort of sorted you guys' lessons out. You did some exhibitions, and then happy days, you went across to your PSA. And so you could get through the week, sort of reasonably fresh. The boys made a bit of money, and there's no reason why other clubs can't. We need people like that, private people, to drive that sort of stuff. So I don't think we can rely on the NSO to do that to a point. But I just think, look, mate, if Wanganui can do it, and the boys made some reasonable coin, that, and the club, as you know, happily supported it. The club paid for the kids to get along. Look, that night, mate, we had 30-odd damn kids.
Yeah, it was cool.
The kids still talk about it, mate. So the offshoot to it of, I think of the young, the Darlington boys, my daughter, other kids, young Maximus, Matthews and other kids that are all ranked nationally under 11s and that, mate, they still talk about it, right? So there's benefits on doing stuff for our young pros.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with you that it's more than one area of the game that needs to kind of step up if we want these kind of results. Because it's very easy. Look, I know people dump on Squash New Zealand, they dump on Squash Australia, and a lot of their criticisms are valid, but they very rarely look in the mirror and ask what they could do. Yeah.
The other thing is, John, in closing for me, everything's secret squirrel. I think we need to collaborate more. Coaches have got a bit better, but not really. We're sort of turf protective, right? I mean, I've done some work over the years, Nick Meader and obviously Grant Watts and various other people. But there's, I think the national body for some way and some kind, we need to collaborate more. There's a hell of a lot of good people out there. We've talked about this. There's a mate of mine, Phil Kupinger in Gisborne, that rocks up to his club and helps. Mate, he's got 40 or 50 guys there wanting to play, right? It's unreal. But he gets no help. Luckily, he does it. There's guys like, excuse me, Corey Love that helps some kids in Wellington. So there's a lot of good people around that if you just see them, hey, if you reached out to people in the provinces, mate, all they would need is a little bit of, can you give us a hand? And people, look, we happily would. And we're not saying we're experts, John, but we've got something to give back to the game. It's a tragedy, John, when people like myself and Corey and that just carry on doing our other stuff when we've got all this bloody collaborative knowledge, of doing stuff. It seems to be, we struggle in New Zealand to reach out to people for whatever reason. Tall poppy, I don't know what it is, mate. But then people like myself go and just do other things and focus on my family and do other things when, mate, our club's 500 metres down the road, we could be helping.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, certainly my experience of some of the interactions with some of the controlling bodies is that they are too controlling. They focus too much on controlling things, doing things the same way, and it just kills innovation. It doesn't kill it, but it stifles innovation, shall we say. Yeah.
What I've enjoyed, John, it's interesting. I thought about this the other day. One thing I do enjoy about my experience with swimming, again, this is just my experience, is that the kids, they train bloody hard. Yep, squash players do too. They train hard. They go to an event to compete and be the best they can be. And there's, again, I'm putting it out there. I just say I'm who I am. There's no boozing. So they're not involved in that whole culture of with the adults again. And I get that bars make money and I get that people drink beer. Good on them, and they can drink as much as they want. It's none of my business. I don't judge it. But swimming's a real interesting one because it's a grind. You go perform, you go home, you sort of interact with people. But there's not a lot of sort of like my kids are not exposed to 10 and 13 of a whole lot of people staying at the bar till 3 a.m. Again, it's not a bad thing, but swimming is a sport where you just swim, you compete. You rest, it's a different community like that. So it's been quite interesting seeing other sports, how they do it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Any tips for the sport of squash as a result of that, or you just feel it's just different?
Look, mate, I can't, I go from one addiction to another. I can't speak, right, mate? I'll go from that. Now I'm doing a bit of swimming. I try and compete. So, mate, I'm as bloody gnarly as anyone in that space, and that's just who I am. But we've not squashes. Look, mate, I just think we've got a massive opportunity in squash in New Zealand at the moment because we've got so much. We've got so much opportunity to play the game. And this is feedback from the very top guys. I speak to a guy in Canada too who's restructuring the game in clubs with pickleball there. He's actually talking to Club K at the moment about some stuff and helping Club K. Spoke to him the other day in Canada, spoke to Alan Thatcher this morning, and he said we've got so many things going for us, mainly that we're playing, John. So what can we do with that for a, mate, what can we do there? How can we do that better? How can we do that better?
Yeah. So what's next for you in squash? It's developing the potentially the mental coaching, bringing your daughter through, plenty of opportunity in the women's game. If she wants to do that, and hopefully she will, but who knows? And then
who knows? It'll be what it'll be.
And a bit of involvement in the Whanganui club as well.
Look, a bit of involvement, mate. I always will have. It's just a bit quiet at the moment. There's, mate, when you're dealing with committees that are not paid, it's tough, right? It's those guys they give their time and their whatever. So the club's in pretty good stead, mate. It's you're relying on volunteers. It's a hard gig. What next for me, John? Look, I thought about it the other day. Actually, I still wouldn't mind being involved sort of in the centre side. I enjoy the commercial side of it, John, as well. So mainly in the centre side commercially. Who knows? Sort of put it out there. Things sort of come your way, and a bit of the mental side. And I still want to look. You fired me up again actually today. I haven't thought about it much of late, but I still want to be involved in the game in some way, shape, or form, and potentially sort of more full time going forward. But we'll see.
Oh, cool. All right. Anything?
I must say in closing. Again, I got offered the job as the high performance coach of ACT about 2 months ago. Actually, I got interviewed by Jenny Duncalf, who I know well, and she's a lovely girl, and Anthony Ricketts at the time, and I was very impressed. But I decided to turn that down because we just sort of relocating the kids back home. Things are pretty good in New Zealand at the moment, but I sort of go, damn, that would have been an opportunity to get involved back in squash full time. Yeah, but I'll sort of bid my time in New Zealand, I think, mate. They're just different markets. The difference is, John, massive more commercial opportunities in Aussie, not so much in New Zealand. But you might have to do things a bit differently here.
Yeah. And you've shown a lot of interest in pickleball. A, because it's fun, obviously, and B, because it's booming around the world, and just as a really a challenge to some of the assumptions we have about squash, about how it's run and operated and that kind of stuff.
Well, look, again, it's inexpensive. It's $5. You don't have to become a member. You can rock up any time. Mate, it's if you can hit a ball over it against the wall once or twice, it's a very simple game. It's very social. There's more things put around social interaction. It's inexpensive to build a centre, all that stuff. So it's got a lot of things going for it. And I see Connie Barnes, who runs Aussie Nick in the States, they're building pickleball courts now. So is my mate in Canada. At their squash centres, they're actually building pickleball facilities, and there's a magnificent setup nationally called Chicken and Pickle in America, of all names, that they've built damn chicken franchises, like chicken on the bone franchises like KFC, but at every place they've got pickleball courts. So that's going gangbusters. People are having a meal and having a hit. So, again, we've got to collaborate. We've got to join up with things. We've got to stop being an individual sport. We've got to actually sort of start having a look outside the box. I've been very sort of vocal on that too when I first came back from Aussie, and that's again talking to guys like Alan Thatcher. They're on a massive mission to sort of break down the walls of the establishment in squash. Centres are closing by the day in the UK, mate. They're in a real mess, so they've got to do something differently.
Yeah, it's over there for sure. Hopefully that'll come right. And we're all relying a lot on this vaccine coming through. It's particularly grim over there for sure. Yeah.
And we might have Egypt, though. You never know.
Yeah, I'm not ruling it out. They seem, I don't know what the story is over there, but they obviously must have a lot of COVID there, and they just keep ticking along, keep training. And, I've been watching Daniel Letourneau's videos of her experience there, and it's humorous, and it's quite tempting. I think it'd be quite challenging.
I see. Not to go off task, but Noran Gohar she got sort of pulled out of the old recent tournament.
Yeah. Well, what was the word? She went to the gym or something and burst out of the bubble.
Whatever it was, through PSA sort of once a year.
You watch a lot of PSA yourself, or?
I keep the odd eye on it, mate. If I don't, my wife sort of keeps me up with. She's sort of a fan. My daughter's a fan of Noran and obviously Neela. So because she's big, but mate. Obviously keep an eye on PC, right? He's one of us, and keep one eye on Neela and obviously Joey. But absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Particularly the old Kiwis, and I still keep an eye on Donna, and obviously a few of the older Aussies have. They've gone by the wayside, but might lace up in for Com Games, mate. You don't know.
Yeah, games is a funny thing, and the way, as you say, you said earlier, the way it pulls people out of the woodwork for varying reasons, and it's quite interesting actually. Certainly, we've seen in the last couple of years a lot of people have kind of dabbled with coming back into squash, and some of them sort of look at my guys and think, well, I used to beat them back in the day. Surely, if I just train for a couple of weeks, I could compete. And
couple of solos, I'll go to the Com Games, right?
yeah, well, it's not quite that bad, but it feels like that. And then they get hit with the reality after about 6 weeks or a couple of months that actually the gap is a lot wider than they thought.
I did get a text from young Mr. Chris van der Sum saying, "Can I have a pressure session after he'd been to Hamilton?" Was it your boy?
Yeah. Well, he's playing doubles. He's playing doubles with Joel. So actually, if they do a bit of practice and can actually gel as a team, which is hard to imagine, but if they could be quite dangerous. Yeah.
Hey, mate, I'm running out of battery. I don't mean to cut you short.
No, that's fair enough. Look, I certainly am too. Hey, look, mate, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Good luck with all your ventures. Hopefully, you're busy taking notes on your next plan to get us down there and training and playing in Whanganui, because we'd certainly like to head down again. And also looking forward to seeing your daughter up this way soon. Presumably New Zealand Junior Open coming up for that?
Yeah, when's it? April or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. All right.
Hey, and no doubt we'll talk, John. Hey, and we'll get you to Wanganui when you got a free moment, mate. Just let me know.
Perfect. Thanks, bro. Take care. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, bud.